This is a tree. I like trees, you like trees, Staten Island is loaded with trees, but the Parks Department, they love trees. The question is, how much are trees worth to the city, and where is all the money going? A few years ago, my friend was building this house. He needed to move a tree in front of his house for an off-street parking spot that was required by zoning. So he asked the Parks Department how much it would cost to move the tree, take it down, plant a new one. Their response was $170,000. That's right, one tree, $170,000. No one can add that amount of money to their construction cost. No bank will just give you an extra $170,000 because you have to pay some imaginary fee to the Parks Department. So he had to change the whole design of his house and create a new driveway that was less safe, less optimal, and not what they wanted. The tree rules affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Here, this owner had to pay an extra $10,000 in restitution fees to the Parks Department to move a small tree out of the way so he could put a fence in to eventually put a pool in his backyard. You too could be sitting on a six-figure sweet gum and not even know it. These tree conundrums are costing homeowners in a lot of ways. The owner of this house is required to have an off-street parking spot in this location per the zoning resolution. They have no choice. Their problem is this big tree. The Parks Department wants $60,000 additional money than doing the job here to take down this tree. This homeowner is going to have to pay that. Sidewalks are really important. People walk on them. People walk on them so they don't walk in the street and get hit by cars. But the Parks Department just doesn't care. It cost this homeowner almost $70,000 to remove the trees necessary to put this sidewalk in. The Parks Department would not waive the restitution fees despite the fact that the law required this sidewalk. The city would rather have substandard narrow sidewalks and save a tree than have safe sidewalks for pedestrians. The rules are so strict, the Parks Department wouldn't even cut down the trees to install sidewalks. The restitution fees they would charge themselves were too expensive. In 2017, I had to pass a law requiring the Parks Department to install sidewalks whenever they built a new field or a playground. Here's the old law. Here's the new law. That's how crazy they are. They prioritize trees above everything else. As you can see, the person who lives in this house requires the use of a wheelchair. But right next door, in the adjacent home, the city gave us a substandard sidewalk to accommodate this tree. This tree would be about 6 figures to take down. Many of these restitutions end up being $10,000 or more. That's $10,000 that gets passed on to the homeowner, and over the course of a 30-year mortgage, that becomes closer to $20,000. $20,000 to remove a tree. Behold, a tree worth over $350,000.
The price is wrong.
And the city doesn't care. That $10,000 calculation, the calculation is the same whether you're building a small single-family home on Staten Island where there's trees everywhere, or you're building a skyscraper in Manhattan where trees are scarce. Here, the builder was forced to pay $8,000 in tree restitution to plant 4 trees. The permits were issued in 2017, the fees were paid, but you can see 4 years later, only 1 tree was ever planted. The costs were passed along to the consumer, of course. And this is happening on dozens of sites throughout Staten Island. Here, this builder was assessed $6,500 in tree restitution fees to plant 2 trees here by the Parks Department. They still haven't come. This whole property was sold for $675,000 2 years ago, and just the tree restitution added to this site is over $600,000. That's going to add over $500,000 that'll get passed along to future homeowners. So, why don't builders and homeowners just plant it themselves? Trees and planting are the last thing to get done. First, you have to notify the Parks Department. Then they'll give you an appointment to visit the site. Then they'll come and show you exactly where you can plant. We just have to sort out this 30-page guide from the Parks Department and then complete this 2-page punch list to plant the tree. And voila! Just a few months later, you'll get a schedule for another appointment for them to come inspect your work. Then you just have to sign a 2-year maintenance agreement to keep the tree alive and safe for 2 years. Bam! And then you'll get your C of O. And by the way, builders and most people could manage to plant trees without the Parks Department help anyway. A builder planted this tree to comply with the city's zoning regulations over a year ago, and they're doing just fine without the Parks Department's intervention. The truth is, if the tree dies, you can just plant a new one. The Parks Department could just make you do that. So where does all this tree money go anyway? We know the Parks Department doesn't do a great job. Here are the results of last year's storm after the owner previously logged numerous calls to 311. They just don't have the resources to maintain what they already have. I'm sure many of you think you're on some secret Parks Department list to repair your sidewalk, but that list isn't even funded. The solution is to change the law, and that's something I'm working to do. We need the City Council to limit the total amount we could assess on property owners so that it's just enough to disincentivize cutting down trees for no reason, but it's still low enough where people can make the best decision for their circumstance. And it should be limited by zoning. Single-family homeowners, small property owners should not pay the same as folks building skyscrapers. And by the way, if the worst case scenario is that the tree is gone, it's probably better to have parks not have that tree than have another tree they can't even maintain. That's my proposed legislation, and that's what we're hoping to pass this year or next year in the City Council. So whatever happened to that $170,000 tree? Well, the owner changed his whole design, he shifted his driveway, and he left the tree alone. But as luck would have it, now surrounded by cement, the tree died, and the Parks Department had to pay to take it down with your taxpayer money. And no, the Parks Department still hasn't been back to plant a new one.